Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another exciting episode of MDIC Live, where we highlight the latest happenings from within the Medical Device Innovation Consortium and around the medical device industry at large. Now, today, we're continuing our conversation on MDIC's strategic initiatives by taking a deeper dive into the role that quality and manufacturing plays in MDIC's mission. And we'll take an even closer look at how one of MDIC's programs is working to drive a culture of quality throughout the medical device industry. Now, I know you all are super excited for today's roundtable discussion. I am too. But before we jump in, I want to remind everyone watching live from Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn that this is an interactive session. So please feel free to leave your comments and questions for today's guest in the chat, and your question just might be answered live at the end of the show. Now, for this episode, please join me in welcoming Policy Analyst for Case for Quality at the FDA's Office of Product Evaluation and Quality, Bleda Vanicki, Director of Quality Systems at Stryker, Denise Nazario, Global Process Owner for CAPA at BD, Rachel Lloyd-Smith, Program Director for Case for Quality at MDIC, Paul Sumner, and Program Manager at MDIC, Desiree Steele. Thank you all for joining me here this afternoon.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thanks. Looking forward to a great session, and I want to go ahead and dive right in. So, Paul, I'll start with you and starting us off with MDIC's prioritization of quality and manufacturing as it relates to the organization's strategic imperatives. Tell us about that prioritization, and how does the Case for Quality collaborative community play a role in that?
Hey, thank you, Devin. I'd like to thank and welcome our wonderful speakers today. So MDIC Spotlight showcases programs and initiatives that really demonstrate that we're making good on MDIC's mission to break down barriers, to accelerate innovation, the adoption of safe, effective, and high-quality medical technologies. For those of you that know me, I'm somewhat musically inclined, so there is a song out there. This is it. This is the great reveal of a successfully impactful journey of many collaborators towards continual quality improvement through innovation by very, very smart collaborators. Today, we are highly excited and pleased to feature the Case for Quality collaborative community's commitment to prioritizing quality in manufacturing by sharing insights from the released impactful Make CAPA Cool whitepaper, a study that has taken participating companies from a burdensome traditional approach to CAPA processes to one of problem solving, risk management, and quality improvement, which leads to greater efficiencies, higher product quality, and ultimately enhanced patient safety. Thank you, Devin.
Thank you, Paul, and thank you for sharing that great news regarding the Make CAPA Cool white paper release. I know it's been a long time coming. Desiree, could you give us an overview of how we got to this momentous occasion?
Sure. So this initiative, also known as Make CAPA Cool, initially kicked off in 2018 or so. And so it has been quite the road, but here we are. And so the idea of the pilot study was really to leverage cross-industry best practices and to reframe or recast, rather, CAPA as a continuous improvement framework. So at the time, CAPA was viewed as being very costly, also being effort intensive. And so with this pilot study, we set out to prove a few things. And so some of those things include that CAPA actually solves problems to improve quality. It has a risk-based approach with a fit for purpose and is impact focused instead of being documentation focused and one size fits all. So fast forward to where we are now, as we are a collaborative community. The FDA, MDIC, of course, a host of medical device manufacturers and volunteers. They all set out to do just that, to prove that CAPA is cool. So we made CAPA cool by putting that framework to test. And that had two main focuses, and that is traditional CAPAs versus fast track CAPAs. And so the much anticipated white paper that we have alluded to is being released, and that will bring all of those findings and those lessons learned full circle.
Thank you, Desiree. And of course, exciting news. Definitely, all of you that are watching here live should definitely check out the white paper as it's been released. And there's a lot more informative, exciting information in there, as we'll discuss during today's session. And one thing you mentioned in your answer, Desiree, was that it was a collaborative effort. It was a team project. And I want to bring in some of the other collaborators that are here with us today into this conversation. So for Denise, Bleda, and Rachel, I want to open up the conversation to you and dive a little bit deeper into the differences in this framework as opposed to traditional approaches to CAPA. Denise, I'll start with you and telling us what some of those differences are.
Sure. So most people are familiar with with CAPAs being one project where you kind of do the same level of work regardless of what the input might be or what the level of risk might be. And what this framework really set out to do was to ensure, one, that we were still compliant with the minimum requirements of a CAPA, right? Both for from a 21 CFR Part 820 and ISO 1345 perspective, but also to ensure that we are taking into account the level of risk associated to an issue. Not all issues are the same. So we want to make sure that we're taking the action that's commensurate to that risk level. And that's how we ended up with the proposal, where you have two different pathways that are based primarily on your input types, the level of risk associated to that, and that comparison kind of to threshold breaches or levels of severity. You take into account different types of risk, but then end up taking the pathway that really makes sense for the issue that at hand. That's kind of what's different here.
Yeah, and if I can add to that, from the regulatory perspective, the framework is not different. So Denise alluded to the fact that the risk-based CAPA process and the framework that was defined by the working group is in alignment with 21 CFR 820 requirements. It is in alignment with ISO 1345. In addition, it is also in alignment with ISO 14971, which requires that risk management be fully integrated into the established QMS. The agency has always expected that the extent of effort to resolve an issue be commensurate or proportionate to risk, which is what the framework has really leveraged and also incorporated. The framework, as Denise mentioned, does highlight the how to really interconnect workflows and QMS elements such as risk management, as well as the trending process that can be leveraged by the organization to triage issues and implement opportunities based on the potential risk to users. So the framework does give greater emphasis to the identified issues that are higher risk or more complex that could potentially impact patients or users or providers, while it also enables a less burdensome approach for lower risk issues, which has allowed the organizations to make a greater number of improvements over time. You will note in the white paper that the pilot emphasizes the importance of organizations to have a mature and robust risk management process, as well as statistical methodology or tracking or trending to ensure that the risk-based framework is effective and results in the improvements that really we saw during the pilot. It's important to also note that during the pilot, we did solicit input from other regulators. At that time, what we heard was, this is what we expect, this is what we see. During the pilot, many other organizations that implemented the framework were also audited by the regulatory bodies as part of MDSAP, some also had FDA inspections, and all of those led to no nonconformities or no issues identified within the CAPA process, which was implemented based on the framework that is noted in the white paper. So from the agency's perspective, applying a risk-based approach has always been the goal and expectation. The white paper walks you through one way of establishing a risk-based approach, but there's other ways that an organization can establish a risk-based CAPA process. And we do encourage you to identify what is the best way for your organization. The white paper does identify or touches on some of the other ways beyond the framework that was noted, that an organization can implement a risk-based CAPA process. And we do encourage you to read the white paper and take advantage of some of the best practices that the working group identified.
Yeah, I think, Devon, to maybe the only thing I can add is I think we've got an industry perspective on the framework intent and a regulatory authority perspective. So perhaps I just add the perspective from what's different about the Make CAPA Cool framework from a user perspective. I can offer that, and essentially what it comes to is, you'll have many a feeder system into CAPA. For argument's sake, today, let's say non-conformance is a feeder system into CAPA. You will then take the event that started and assess it for risk. We've heard a lot about the importance of that dynamic, using your risk management files and other risk assessment tools. And essentially what's different with the Make CAPA Call is that if the event meets the criteria to follow the Make CAPA Call, you can then do your implementation of the corrective actions. But then really the key difference here, what makes it cool, is that you use your QMS to do the ongoing verification of effectiveness. Or in other words, you use your QMS to do your ongoing monitoring of reoccurrence, or what you're hoping to see is no reoccurrence of that event again. And from a user perspective, that's really what's different. It gives you a faster pathway through to closing that CAPA record. You're really focusing on problem solving and putting the corrective action in place. You can often go from CAPA corrective action implementation to closing the record a lot faster. So from a user perspective, that's really what's going to feel different about Make CAPA Cool.
Thank you to all three of you, Denise, Bleda, and Rachel, for sharing your perspectives on that question. I hope to get your continued perspectives on the further discussion that we're going to have here today, including the next discussion topic that we'll dive into, which is going to be understanding what the value proposition and the impact of this release would be, as well as the challenges and successes of implementing this initiative out into the ecosystem. Denise, I want to start the discussion off with you.
Sure, and I'll start with the latter part of your question with the challenges. So one of the first things that might present itself as a challenge is one we kind of addressed earlier on, is the compliance perspective. So rest assured, this is a compliant proposal. Otherwise, we wouldn't be presenting to you today. That aside, it's all about having the right tools in place to effectively leverage the process. So as both Rachel and Bleda mentioned, having really good measuring, monitoring, trending, and analytics of your input sources, as well as being able to leverage those on the back end of your CAPA for your effectiveness checks is key to being able to move quickly. And one of the benefits that we actually saw with this implementation is having that upfront visibility of our data led to the early identification of shifts and trends, which actually led to a 30+ increase in preventive CAPAs. So people are not necessarily needing to wait till a threshold is breached or a trigger is met to issue a CAPA. There's an opportunity, and because there's a lighter pathway from a documentation perspective to address that, people are more eager and engaged with the CAPA process to leverage it for preventive purposes as well. And then just from a patient perspective, the fact that we can iterate using the fast track CAPA pathway definitely benefits patients and the business alike, because we're putting our efforts towards incremental improvements so that our customers are able to benefit from that earlier than having to wait for a full-blown CAPA for something that's not as risky, right? They'll be able to see that rendered fruit earlier in the process. And I think that's one of the most brilliant aspects of the proposal.
Yeah, so risk-based framework, as Denise just highlighted, has led to improved resource utilization, improved risk management process. She mentioned the increase of product resolution and prevention of nonconformities even before they become or rise to a quality or a safety issue, and quicker resolution of problems or even preventative actions that the agency has taken. From the regulator, this all leads to improved product quality for patients and providers, which directly ties to the mission of CDRH. The organizations did run into some challenges. Some were mentioned by Denise, and you'll hear from Rachel as well. But in order to apply a effective risk-based CAPA process or a risk-based approach, the organization needs to ensure that they're consistently and successfully applying their risk management process, but also identifying the meaningful thresholds for action and adequately distinguishing risk levels, as well as their ability to detect and evaluate trends or signals so they can react quickly and solve those problems accordingly. During the pilot, the framework did highlight some weaknesses within some of the organizations that applied the risk-based framework, primarily within the system of risk management and the statistical methodologies, so tracking and trending. But all the organizations really took proactive steps to improve their systems that connect to the QMS and to the CAPA process. So overall, there was a benefit as well as a challenge. The whole goal of Case for Quality is to continue maturing and improving the processes established. And that's exactly what we saw from the sites that were enrolled in the Make CAPA Cool pilot. Overall, the pilot resulted in many tangible benefits, some that Denise highlighted, but the one to mention is that it resulted in up to 80% reduction in time required to implement improvements. That is huge. And of high benefit to industry, but as well as we mentioned, a benefit to patients and providers because it's driving towards higher quality products. We do highly encourage that organizations do evaluate the maturity of the systems that they have established, but also identify a risk-based framework that works for them. And as mentioned earlier, this is one approach, but there's others. Some may have already established a risk-based approach, and the CAPA white paper may allow them to continue to improve that approach. For others, this may be new, and it's an opportunity to continue evaluating and seeing how to best address it within their own organizations.
Yeah, Devon, if I maybe just add to that, in terms of the value proposition, we've heard some of the key points here from Denise and Blita, and just to sum that up, essentially, what Make CAPA Core gives organizations the opportunity, the potential for, is to maintain that level of compliance, quality, and safe products going out to the market, but in a more efficient, iterative, saving time and saving money. And that's the potential opportunity, on the table here. Now, I do think it's important to balance that out with those wise cautions, let's call them that, where we speak about the challenges, for this to work and to work robustly and safely. That decision point when you say, let's assess this event, and does it need to go to what we'll call today, for argument's sake, a traditional CAPA or a fast track CAPA, that decision point is extremely vital, and you need to know, you need to be referring off to and need to know why you think that the traditional CAPA or the fast track CAPA is the right way to go. Let's say you choose the fast track CAPA, the value proposition, the opportunities, I think they've been well laid out and are really from the pilots that have been run. And I would recommend people read the white paper. The value proposition is extremely powerful. That said, I'm also able to offer an insight into some of the challenges. I would say that just a practical comment, perhaps. We've grown CAPA through the industry to be a one-size-fit-all events. Now, what Make CAPA Cool and Fast Track CAPA offers is a response commensurate with the risk of the event. So it's not just one size fits. You can send it down the right path and do a response commensurate with the risk of the event, right size fit. But also, you probably need to update some of your maybe IT systems, your global e-system. You'll definitely need to update your processes because CAPA has grown to date to be a one size fits all. So maybe even more of a lower barrier to accessing the opportunities for those smaller to medium size medical device organizations who perhaps haven't got such deeply rooted e-systems that are just offering this traditional CAPA pathway. So it's definitely a challenge that can be surmountable for sure, but I'll offer it there for people that are really intrigued and excited by the powerful value proposition, which certainly has been proven through the pilots. But I would say take that and add to it, balance it out with the cautions and the steps to ensure that your implementation is successful.
Thank you, three, and thank you for the thoroughness of your answers, and thank you again for sharing all of your varying perspectives on the value and challenges and successes of this initiative. It's definitely helpful, and I hope everyone listening here has found it valuable. Paul, before we go to the audience Q&A questions, I want to give you an opportunity to give some concluding remarks and to let us know about upcoming engagement opportunities that our watchers here today can expect from the Case for Quality collaborative community.
Sure. Thanks, Devin. Some powerful information here of impactful initiative from the Case for Quality collaborative community. This is, in my opinion, phenomenal work. Some that I've spoken to call this the Rosetta Stone for continual improvement. I want to thank the audience and especially the speakers for attending today's session. I hope you got as much out of this information and have a craving for digging a little bit deeper and having a full understanding of the framework, some of the use cases, lessons learned from the pilot study. We will be featuring this in a two-day quality summit, June 20th and 21st, to be hosted in Washington, D.C. Stay tuned for details. Come back to the MDIC website for information if you're interested. And also you can reach out directly to either Desiree or myself, or go to cfqcc@mdic.org. I want to just extend a special appreciation for not only the speakers, but the volunteer collaborators within FDA, industry, and other stakeholders in the healthcare ecosystem for this impactful achievement. It definitely has a positive impact on patient safety, which is what we're all about. So thank you. Turn it back to you, Devin.
Thank you. So now, folks, it is time for our audience Q&A portion. We have time to answer about 2 questions here. So we're going to go ahead and jump into that section of today's MDIC live session. So without further ado, our first question comes from Sean M. Schmidt. And his question asks, will this new CAPA approach/framework still be effective for the upcoming final quality management system regulation from the FDA? I assume so because the framework is geared toward 80/20 and 12-485, but wanted your perspective. Also, might any part of the framework need change when 80/20 changes from QSR to QMSR? Thanks. Does anyone want to take that question on?
Yeah, I'll take part of the question. So the working group addressed whether the framework is in alignment with 21 CFR 820 as well as ISO 13485. And what we noted is that it is the framework is in alignment with both requirements as well as during the audits. There was no nonconformities that led to or that identified CAPA as a gap or a nonconformity. In terms of whether it will need to change once the final rule is out, I think we'll have to wait for the final rule in order for further evaluation. But from what we know now is that it is in full alignment with 21 CFR 820 as well as ISO 13485.
Thank you. Does anyone else want to comment before we move on to the next question? Okay.
Well, I can say that the white paper has some results that could also answer this question in terms of notified body auditors that came into the pilot participants, found this framework to be exceptional and quoted as this is a gold star for that continual improvement, what we expect of a proactive CAPA system.
Thank you. And I'll move on to our next question. Our next question comes from Lynn Roberts, and Lynn asks, what cultural changes are needed within organizations to experience the biggest impact from the risk-based framework?
So I'll take that first. I think the biggest change is having that continuous improvement mindset and not looking at CAPA as a punishment. You know, it's really an opportunity to live our mission. Whatever industry you're in, your end goal is to provide customers the best possible products and solutions that you can. So looking at CAPA as an opportunity to do that, and embrace the CAPA process as it should be, as a continuous improvement tool, is the mindset shift that we're really seeking. And in making it easier for people to make the determination when to go to CAPA and what type of CAPA, what level of investigation or what level of rigor is needed in those CAPAs is what makes it enticing for the user, right? So, as I mentioned earlier, in our case, it's promoted more preventive actions, and the fast track CAPAs definitely move quicker than traditional CAPAs. So that definitely engages the user to use the system and the process better. But essentially, it's continuous improvement. We shouldn't think about it any other way.
Yeah, and Devon, I'd echo that, and I'm conscious that we're probably short on time, so I'll just give a short answer to say that one of the cultural changes that's needed is this concept of leveraging your QMS for that ongoing monitoring. So I'll just compare it to a traditional CAPA where you do your often an independent, a standalone verification of effectiveness, but with the fast track CAPA leveraging of the QMS, this is where the opportunity for saving that time, closing the CAPA record out much faster. I mean, I think the white paper, there is a data point of an average of 189 days going down to sub 60 days average turnaround time for fast track CAPAs. That's a significant difference. But in order to achieve that, the cultural change that's needed to get that big impact is one where people feel confident, and it's a paradigm shift around CAPAs, whereby they are incorporated for the ongoing monitoring. They're incorporated into your QMS.
Thank you, guys, and thank you again for all your perspectives on the question. It's definitely appreciated and valuable for our audience. We're going to move to one last audience question before we wrap up for today, and that question is from Arissa Wernell. Arissa asks, what considerations should be made while assessing whether the supplier SCAR program, SCAR program within an organization can adopt a similar fast track methodology? Does anyone want to take that question on?
Yeah, I'll jump in, Devon, only because I've actually given it some food for thought myself. It's a great question, and certainly an area where I believe once the fast track CAPA is established in an organization, I do see that being the next area that it could grow into, and they can start benefiting from it as well. In terms of the considerations, I mean, the simplest and shortest answer is that you would hope that as the prevalence of fast track CAPA grows in the industry, that actually the supplier that you are working with has naturally chosen of their own choosing, has chosen to adopt it and implement it into their QMS as well. So obviously, when working with a SCAR program, your supplier is the one that's really needing to do some of those CAPA activities. Again, it's the same fundamental risk-based evaluation that would be needed to decide, can you even offer this fast track pathway to some of your suppliers? I think really when even selecting which suppliers to work with, the consideration would be using your supplier evaluation to decide which suppliers are going to have that maturity of QMS, but more specifically the maturity of their risk management justification and risk management scaling. And I would recommend working with that level of supplier first and foremost. So that's not by any means a full inventory of the considerations, but maybe just some things to get started. But absolutely, an area where I can see potential growth for the fast track CAPA framework.
Thank you. And thank you to everyone. I want to thank everyone for participating in this session here today. I want to thank our audience for their interactiveness and their participation as well. We love to see comments and questions. And I thoroughly enjoyed this session. I hope everyone that's watching live from Twitter, YouTube, LinkedIn, and Facebook did as well. But to Denise, Bleda, Rachel, Paul, and Desiree, I want to thank you guys for participating.
Thank you.
Thanks, Devon.
So everyone watching live from Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn, I hope you found this session to be valuable. For more information on the Case for Quality Make CAPA Cool white paper, please visit mdic.tech/make CAPA Cool, CAPAs in all caps, to download that white paper framework and to learn more about some of the information that you've heard here today, as well as some of the information regarding the upcoming Case for Quality Summit scheduled for June in Washington, D.C. I'm signing off for today's episode of MDIC Live. Thanks for joining, and I hope to see you next time.